हेलो दोस्तों, बिजनेस पॉइंट में आपका स्वागत है। और अभी हम कर रहे हैं इकोनॉमिक्स। ठीक है, तो इससे पहले की क्लास नहीं करी है तो फिर जा करके देख सकते हैं। ग्रोथ एंड चेंजिंग स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट यहाँ तक कर लिया था, अब इससे आगे करेंगे। इन चैप्टर 2 and 3 you might have studied about the planning strategies in detail. Here we look at two developmental indicators, growth of employment and GDP. Nearly 70 years of planned development have been aimed at expansion of the economy through increase in national output and employment. During the period 1950 2010, gross domestic product GDP of India grew positively and was higher than the employment growth. However, there was always fluctuation in the growth of GDP. During this period, employment grew at the rate of not more than 2%. Chart 6.3 also points at another disheartening development in the late 1990s. Employment growth started declining and reached the level of growth that India had in the early stages of planning. During these years, we also find a widening gap between the growth of GDP and employment. This means that in the Indian economy, without generating employment, we have been able to produce more goods and services. Scholars refer to this phenomenon as jobless growth. So far, we have seen how employment has grown in comparison to GDP. Now, it is necessary to know how the growth pattern of employment and GDP affected different sections of workforce. From this we will also be able to understand what types of employment are generated in our country. Let us look at two indicators that we have seen in the preceding sections: employment of people in various industries and their status. We know that India is an agrarian nation. A major section of population lives in rural areas and is dependent on agriculture as their main livelihood. Developmental strategies in many countries, including India, have aimed at reducing the proportion of people depending on agriculture. Distribution of workforce by industrial sectors shows substantial shift from farm work to non-farm work. In 1970 to 73, about 74% of workforce was engaged in primary sector, and in 2022-2023, this proportion has declined to about 46%. Secondary and service sectors are showing promising future for the Indian workforce. You may notice that the shares of these sectors have increased from 11 to 25% and 15 to 29% respectively. The distribution of workforce in different status indicates that over last 5 decades, 1972 to 2023, people have moved from self-employment and regular salaried employment to casual wage work. Yet self-employment continues to be the major employment provider. Look at the last column of table 6.3. How do you understand the stagnation of secondary sector and moderate rise in self-employment during 2011 to 2023? Discussed in the class. Scholars call the process of moving from self-employment and regular salaried employment to casual wage work has casualization of workforce. This makes the workers highly vulnerable. How? Look at the case study of Ahmedabad in the preceding section. In the meantime, you also notice in 2017-2023 a moderate rise in the share of regular salaried employees. How do you explain this phenomenon? Growth of employment and gross domestic product 1951-2023। ये 1951 से 56 है, 0.39 3.6, और यहाँ पे 33.2 टू 7% 2022-2023 में। Informationalization of Indian workforce. In the previous section, we have found that the proportion of hired work jobs working for others has been increasing. One of the objectives of development planning in India since India's independence has been to provide decent livelihood to its people. It has been envisated that the industrialization strategy would bring surplus workers from agriculture to industry with better standard of living as in developed countries. We have seen in the preceding section that even after 70 years of planned development, more than half of the Indian workforce depends on farming as the major source of livelihood. Economists argue that over the years the quality of employment has been deteriorating even after working for more than 10 to 20 years. Why do some workers not get maternity benefit, provident fund, gratuity, and pension? Why does a person working in the private sector get a lower salary as compared to another person doing the same work but in the public sector? You may find that a small section of Indian workforce is getting regular income. The government, through its labor laws, enable them to protect their rights in various ways. This section of the workforce from trade unions bargains with employers for better wages and other social security measures. Who are they? To know this, we classify workforce into two categories: workers in formal and informal sectors, which are also referred to as organized and unorganized sectors. All the public sector establishment and those private sector establishments which employ 10 hired workers or more are called formal sector establishment, and those who work in such establishments are formal sector workers. All other enterprises and workers working in those enterprises from the informal sector. Thus, informal sector includes millions of farmers, agricultural laborers, owners of small enterprises, and people working in those enterprises, has also the self-employed who do not have any hired workers. It also includes all non-farm casual wage laborers who work for more than one employer, such as construction workers and heat load workers. You may note that this is one of the ways of classifying workers. There could be other ways of classification as well. Discuss the possible ways in the class. अब आ जाते हैं बॉक्स 6.1 फॉर्मल सेक्टर एम्प्लॉयमेंट दिस द information relating to employment in the formal sector is collected by the Union Ministry of Labor through employment exchanges located in different parts of the country. Do you know who is the major employer in the formal sector in India in 2012? Out of about 30 million formal sector workers, about 18 million workers were employed by the public sector. Here also men form the majority as women constitute only about one-sixth of the formal sector workforce. Economists point out that the reform process initiated in the early 1990s resulted in a decline in the number of workers employed in the formal sector. What do you think? Those who are working in the formal sector enjoy social security benefits. They earn more than those in the informal sector. Developmental planning envisaged that as the economy grows, more and more workers would become formal sector workers and the proportion of workers engaged in the informal sector would dwindle. But what has happened in India? Look at the following chart, which gives the distribution of workforce in formal and informal sectors. We learned that in 2012, 2011-12, there were about 473 million workers in India. There were about 30 million workers in the formal sector. Can you estimate the percentage of people employed in the formal sectors in the country? About only 6%, 30 473 into 100, thus the rest 94% are in the formal sector. In 2020-11-12, the year for which gender-wise data on formal informal sector employment is available, chart 6.4, about 20% of formal sector and 30% of informal sector workers are women. Since the late 1970s, many developing countries, including India, started paying attention to enterprises and workers in the informal sector as employment in the formal sector is not growing. Workers and enterprises in the informal sector do not get regular income. They do not have any protection or regulation from the government. Workers are dismissed without any compensation. Technology used in the informal sector enterprises is outdated. They also do not maintain any accounts. Workers of this sector live in slums and there are squatters. Of late, owing to the efforts of the International Labour Organization (ILO), the Indian government has initiated the modernization of informal sector enterprises and provision of social security measures to informal sector workers. Unemployment. You might have seen people looking for jobs in newspapers. Some look for a job through friends and relatives. In many cities, you might find people standing in some select area looking for people to from employ them for that day's work. Some go to factories and offices and give their biodata and ask whether whether there is any vacancy in their factory or office. Many in the rural areas do not go out and ask for a job but stay home when there is no work. Some go to some go to employment exchanges and register themselves for vacancies notified through employment exchanges. The National Statistical Office, previously it was known as National Sample Survey Organization, defines unemployment as a situation in which all those who, owing to lack of work, are not working but either seek work through employment exchanges, intermediaries, friends and or relatives, or by making applications to prospective employers or express their willingness or ability for work under the prevailing condition of work and remunerations. There are a variety of ways by which an employed person is identified. Economists define unemployed person as one who is not able to get employment of even 1 hour in a day. There are three sources of data on employment: reports of Census of India, National Statistical Office's reports of employment and unemployment situations, annual reports of periodic labor force survey, and Directorate General of employment and training data of registration with employment exchanges. Though they provide different estimates of unemployment, they do provide us with the attributes of the unemployed and variety of unemployment prevailing in our country. Do we have different types of unemployment in our economy? The situation described in the first paragraph of this section is called upon open unemployment. Economists call unemployment prevailing in Indian firms has disguised unemployment. What is disguised unemployment? Suppose a farmer has 4 acres of land and he actually needs only 2 workers and himself to carry out various operations on his farm in a year. But if he employs 5 workers and his family members such as his wife and children, this situation is known as disguised unemployment. One study conducted in the late 1950s showed about one third of agriculture workers in India has disguisedly unemployed. You may have noticed that many people migrate to an urban area, pick up a job and stay there for some time, but come back to their home villages as soon as the rainy season begins. Why do so? This is because work in agriculture is seasonal. There are no employment opportunities in the village for all months in the year. When there is no work to do on farms, people go to urban areas look for jobs. This kind of unemployment is known as seasonal unemployment. This is also a common form of unemployment prevailing in India. Though we have witnessed slow growth of employment, have you seen people being unemployed over a very long time? Scholars say that in India, people cannot remain completely unemployed for very long because their desperate economic condition would not allow them to be so. You will rather find them being forced to accept jobs that nobody else would do, unpleasant or even dangerous jobs in unclean or unhealthy surroundings. The central and state governments take initiatives and generate employment to facilitate a decent living for low-income families through various measures. These will be discussed in the following section. Government and employment generation. You may recall about the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2025. It promises 100 days of guaranteed wage employment to all rural households who volunteer to do unskilled manual work. The scheme based on this AI Act is one of the many measures the government has implemented to generate employment for those who are in need of jobs in rural areas. Since independence, the union and state governments have played an important role in generating employment or creating opportunities for employment generation. Their efforts can be broadly categorized into two: direct and indirect. In the first category, as you have seen in the preceding section, the government employs people in various departments for administrative purposes. It also runs industries, hotels, and transport companies and hence provides employment directly to workers. When the output of goods and services from government enterprises increases, then private enterprises which receive raw materials from government enterprises will also raise their output and hence increase the number of employment opportunities in the economy. For example, when a government owned steel company increases its output, it will result in direct increase in employment in that government company. Simultaneously, private companies which purchases steel from it will also increase their output and thus employment. This is the indirect generation of employment opportunities by the government initiatives in the company. Many programs that the governments implement aimed at availing alleviating poverty are through employment generation. They are also known as employment generation programs. All these programs aim at providing not only employment but also services in areas such as primary health, education, rural drinking water, nutrition, assistance for people to buy income and employment generating assets, development of community assets by generating wage employment, construction of houses and sanitization, assistance for constructing houses, laying of rural roads, development of wastelands and degraded lands. Conclusion: there has been a change in the structure of workforce in India. Newly emerging jobs are found mostly in the service sector. The expansion of the service sector and the advent of high technology now frequently permit a highly competitive existence for efficient small scale and often individual enterprises or specialist workers side by side with the multinationals. Outsourcing of work is becoming a common practice. It means that a big firm find it finds it profitable to close down some of its specialist departments, for example, legal or computer programming or customer service sections, and hand over a large number of small piecemeal jobs to very small enterprises or specialist individuals, sometimes situated even other countries. The traditional notion of the modern factory or office as a result has been altered in such a manner that for many the home is becoming the workplace. All of this change has not gone in favor of the individual worker. The nature of employment has become more informal with only limited availability of social security measures to the workers. In the last few decades, there has been rapid growth in the gross domestic product, but without simultaneous increase in employment opportunities. This has forced the government to take up initiatives in generating employment opportunities, particularly in the rural areas. फिर आ जाते हैं recap. All those persons who are engaged in various economic activities and hence contribute to gross national product are workers. About two-fifths of the total population in the country is engaged in various economic activities. Men, particularly rural men, form the major section of workforce in India. Majority of workers in India are self-employed. casual wage laborers, and regular salaried employees together account for less than half the proportion of India's workforce. About three-fifths of India's workforce depends on agriculture and other allied activities as the major source of livelihoods. In recent years, the growth of employment has decelerated. During post-reform period, India has been witness of employment opportunities in the service sector. These new jobs are found mostly in the informal sector, and the nature of jobs is also mostly casual. Government is the major formal sector employer in the country. Disguised and unemployment is a common form of unemployment in rural India. There has been a change in the structure of the workforce in India. Through various schemes and policies, the government takes initiatives to generate employment directly and indirectly. और इसी के साथ ये चैप्टर हो जाता है समाप्त।